Hello everybody, welcome back. My name is Miranda if you're new here. Today we are going to be discussing Bridgerton Season 4. It's only been a couple months since Season 3 ended, but now that we have confirmation on who is going to be the lead in Season 4, I want to make a video kind of just getting together my thoughts on what I'm hoping to see in Season 4 and what I think that they can improve upon from Season 3, since Season 3 wasn't the best, I think, is the consensus among a lot of people, but I also think there's a lot of things they can do to change that for Season 4 and make it better, more towards what it was in the first two seasons of when people were really obsessed with it. And I do think it's harder nowadays in general to get kind of a hit show that lasts. It's really easy to get a show that everyone's talking about for a week or a month at a time when it first drops, especially streaming wise. But it's definitely hard to get that longevity of like people talking about it for longer periods of time, going back and rewatching it. I feel like there's many reasons for this. The biggest one being is streaming fatigue, I think. It seems more towards the trend of like, instead of 22 episodes of something of a season, now we're getting 8-episode seasons that take 2, 3, maybe more years to come out. So really, like, you might be obsessed with a show when it's out, and then you kind of move on because it's so long. It's no longer like, 2 or 3 months till the next season comes out. And obviously, as consumers, you're trying to find something to entertain you, so you're gonna find something else and kind of maybe forget about what that first show was that you were obsessed with until it eventually comes back, and then you run the risk of it not being as good, because if you have a season 1 and a season 2 of something, like I'm thinking of like when I was growing up, Vampire Diaries, Pretty Little Liars, these seasons were very, very quick together. Like you usually had a winter kind of premiere and then a fall premiere, and there was like just a little bit of break in between each of them, and it made it so not every season was great, but you knew that, oh, maybe next season's going to be better, and I only have to wait like 2 months at a time for this. Now it's more frustrating when you're like, I've waited 2 years for this and the season isn't that great. So I feel like there's an overarching trend of this that's happening where it's like just streaming in general is again trying to profit, I think, more than anything else. So they're also trying their hardest to make hit shows while not putting the time and care into developing those shows and being like, hey, let's have you film 2 seasons at a time instead of 1, so then people can get the content sooner and really talk about it for longer. And the reason I'm talking about this is because I do think for the first 2 seasons of Bridgerton, there was a huge online fanfare that lasted a pretty good amount of time. And I would say even with Queen Charlotte a little bit, it lasted a good amount of time. People talking about it, reacting to it. I think of like, there were tons of Instagram pages of like bookstores selling the books, libraries featuring them on their main like displays and everything like that, because everyone just wanted a piece of Bridgerton. I feel like after season 3, that didn't really happen. Like, yeah, maybe I saw it for the week it was out or something like that, but then it quickly tapered off, and it also wasn't all like, this is amazing, I love this show. It was kind of like, well, this is disappointing, or like, I like this part, but we spent too much time on this. And I just feel like that's frustrating, especially like I said, when we had to wait so long for the season, and especially Penelope and Colin in general was one that had been built up from season 1, so we really wanted them to have their time to shine. And unfortunately, overall, it just didn't happen. So season 4 is going to be Benedict's season. I feel like I got into this video and didn't even say that. But yeah, it's going to be Benedict's season if you didn't know. There was a little confusion about if it's going to be Francesca, since she had a lot going on in the last one, Eloise, who it's always been teased that it's going to be Eloise, and Benedict. I feel like because they take so long in between seasons, they're also running into the issue that their cast is going to start aging out of what they're supposed to be. Like Eloise is still supposed to be like 20, I think, and we're getting basically 2 years until it's Benedict's season, and then who knows if it's another 2 years until Eloise maybe season. So I do think they're running the risk of, that's another thing, when they take so long, it's going to be more and more unbelievable to think like these are people who are young meeting the loves of their life, like, like really young. But I also feel like you would have had that problem with Benedict too, so I see where they had to do either a Benedict or an Eloise season rather quickly. I do also think since the start, just based on like people I know who have read the whole series, the first like 4 books and the first 4 siblings are kind of the more popular ones. So you have Daphne, you have Anthony, Colin and Penelope is a pretty popular one, Benedict, and then Eloise. People don't like Eloise's book, so I'm curious to see what they're going to do with her season, but I'll talk about that later. But I always just thought that there was going to be a drop-off, maybe, even from season 1 of being like, oh, here's the characters that we're really invested in. Daphne, Simon, Anthony, Benedict, blah, blah, blah. And it seems like once they kind of get coupled up, the show doesn't focus on them anymore, which I think is also a mistake because, you know, you're losing characters that drew people in originally. Like, not having Simon, and especially Daphne and Simon, has felt like a big hole, I think, in season 3. It just kind of felt weird to not even have them really mentioned overall. And then there's been talk about Anthony and Kate not coming back for the next season, even though they were barely on this season. We also don't know what kind of role Penelope and Colin will have, but it'll most definitely be reduced, which is kind of absurd because their role already felt reduced in a way in their actual season. So there's a lot of that. I just feel like I wish they would make a more core cast of the family and not focus so much on outside of it. Like, for me, I definitely think season 2 there was a lot of setup with the Featheringtons that took away from Anthony and Kate's storyline that I just didn't care for. And yeah, the payoff kind of happened in season 3, but I also feel like you could have set that up in a quicker way without taking so much time away in season 2 and still had the payoff in season 3, because season 3 is really the only episode where, or the only season in general where I really did not mind the Featheringtons, and now it seems like they're done because their actors have made like farewell Instagram posts or stuff like that. So I haven't actually read Benedict's book, but I know it's very, very well loved. It's a Cinderella storyline, I believe, where like they meet at a masquerade party, which was hinted at the end of season 3, the Bridgerton Violet's masquerade party, and then he doesn't know who she is, and then shenanigans ensue until they find each other. It is very interesting because the last we saw of Benedict was him turning down being in a monogamous relationship with that widow lady that he was having threesomes with all the time, because he finally said he like felt freedom and he didn't want to give that up. So I have seen some people say maybe they'll explore like polyamorous relationships or stuff like that with this, which would be interesting. But overall, I just don't have the highest hopes for this season. I think Netflix is setting them up on a bad foot, and then also the show itself is setting them up on a bad foot. So first of all, Netflix, they have to stop with splitting seasons in 2. It is so frustrating. It really cuts the momentum. There are some, and I've said this before, that do work for it. I think more like action-y kind of shows that can end on cliffhangers definitely would work well with 2 split seasons. But like Outer Banks they're talking about doesn't need to be one. Bridgerton did not need to be one. Even like Cobra Kai, everything nowadays is split into 2 parts, and it's very obviously a marketing ploy to be like, oh, people are going to be more invested if we make it. But again, it just cuts that tension away because we're not talking 22 episodes. We're talking 6. We're talking 8. So it's like you get 4 episodes, and then I've got to wait a month, 6 weeks for 4 more episodes. The payoff is just not there. If we're getting longer seasons, yeah, I'd be okay with that. Even if it was just like maybe like 6 in the first part and then 5 in the next one. You know, I feel like they just need to get back to making longer seasons, even if it means shorter episodes. Like, I feel like Bridgerton season 3 would have benefited so much, especially with the side characters that they threw in, from a longer season, because you would have had more time to develop Penelope and Colin's storyline instead of it having to kind of be rushed so you could cram in all this other stuff. I don't think that's going to change because it seems to be the move with every single show they're making now is going to be like that, which is disappointing because I do think it takes away overall from the storyline in a majority of the cases. Second thing, I kind of touched on this already, but Bridgerton way needs to cut down on the side storylines. There's just so many characters to keep track of, and there already are so many characters to keep track of that getting rid of characters in favor of new ones that now we have to learn to care about just doesn't work. Like I said, the Featheringtons in season 2, didn't care about that. They were fine in season 3, but I think had you scale it back in season 2, that wouldn't have had any impact. This was a bit of a problem in season 2 is when I first started to see it, because I do think like Anthony and Kate were apart physically for so much of the season that when they did come together, it was like, wait, we're not getting like our reward of like actually seeing them be happy and together after going through all that angst of like the last few episodes. I also feel like this would definitely help budget-wise if they could just scale it back and focus again on the family. Like, yeah, we can have our outside kind of couple friends. Like, I did like Marcus and his wife. I thought they were fine, but again, it just takes away time from Penelope and Colin and the main storyline. And even again, like, had we cut out maybe some of Benedict stuff with having threesomes every single time and devoted more of that to Penelope stuff, then keeping Marcus and his wife in would have been great, because I do think it's an interesting storyline, and I would much rather have that over like the Featheringtons or something like that. But now we have the addition of Francesca, John, Michaela, Eloise all away in Scotland, so you know we're going to be cutting between the Bridgerton household and them, getting that set up. So it's just new characters being introduced without, I think, at the cost actually of old characters that we love and adore already. And that just doesn't work. It's frustrating, even in a character that you like Benedict, putting him with two characters that we hadn't previously known and having so much of his time being about that instead of seeing like the family or even him hanging out with Marcus and stuff like that. It just doesn't work because we don't care about these people, and you're doing it at the cost of people we do care about, which makes people even angrier. I kind of touched on this before, but I would also love if the episode count went up. It's not going to happen. This is kind of par for the course with Netflix and streaming, is it's always like under 10 episodes, but I just feel like in general, shows could benefit from having more episodes. They can draw out their storylines. They don't have to push so much in such a short little time. And then it also makes it so if you want people to watch something longer, guess what? It's going to take me longer to watch 12 episodes than it's going to take me to watch 8 or 6 of something. So I think that could really be great, especially as we're expanding the storyline. That could be a good balance. Like if you do so want to keep adding these characters in, at least give me more time to enjoy them and not feel like they're taking away from the main couple, because obviously this season should be about Benedict. And what's really frustrating for me too is the focus, at least in the last half, because that's when theoretically they should be setting up the next main, was on Benedict and kind of his relationships. I get that, like, yeah, it's going to be a relationship is the whole thing. This is a romance show. But I really liked at the beginning of this season when they were talking about how Anthony was impressed that Benedict like was able to manage the household so well for him in his absence. And Benedict kind of offhand was like, yeah, it was kind of nice to like have something to do and like not mess it up like people expect me to. Like I would have liked more exploration of that, of how he's kind of just like the F up brother and like no one really expects much of him. Like they love him, but no one expects much of him, and how that can put a stereotype on you. And how he struggles with that and kind of being this carefree guy, but also like no one really expects him to step up when the time comes. I feel like that would have been way more interesting than just being like, oh, I have threesomes now, but I want to explore my freedom and not be locked down. Like it just was not, I think, the note to end it on. I've seen a lot of people talking about this, and I am not the most well versed on this, so I would definitely highly recommend you check out like videos if you can, articles, but the fashion itself has degraded. I've seen people talk about how it's not historically accurate at all and like how that's not a huge deal, but it's getting to the point where it's like ridiculous. We're talking like false eyelashes, glitter eyeshadow, like stuff that you would just never see, and they're making it so it almost is like, I've seen people call it like sheen Bridgerton, where it's like in season 1 they had beautiful dresses that were more accurate to the time period. Even in season 2, Kate's whole wardrobe was absolutely gorgeous. In this one, we kind of just got generic, pretty dresses that didn't even look like they held up that well, you know? Like, nothing was memorable the way, like, Daphne's dress was in season 1, or a couple of Daphne's dresses in season 1, actually. And it just feels like the quality of that has gone down as the budget has presumably gone up, which is kind of weird. Like I said, I don't know too much about it. I'm not versed in like what would be more accurate towards that time, even though even I can know that falsies are not are not a thing they had back then. But there's tons of articles and videos, like I said, I'll link a couple down below, talking about like why this is really a detriment to the show. And it's not even asking for, again, like fully historical accuracy, but just for the dresses to look better made and not be so like you got this at Forever 21. Another big thing, and it pains me to say this because I really want to give her a chance, but I just think seeing what happened in season 3 and how she has talked about future seasons worries me. The showrunner changed from seasons 1 and 2 to season 3, and I think it is unfortunately very noticeable. I mean, the biggest thing I think is the time gap between seasons coming out. Season 4 was already supposed to start filming, but it's now got pushed back to September. It won't be wrapped up till April of 2025, people are thinking, and then you've got to figure out editing time for that and everything, and it's pretty clear that we're not getting another season for another 2 years at least, which is frustrating to say the least, because prior to that, like, Bridgerton 1 and 2 did come out pretty quickly. I mean, it took a while, but this was, again, in a pandemic and everything like that, so the fact that they were able to get it out so fast was impressive, and now to be like, hey, it's taking longer is kind of like, ugh. I think they're also running into the problem where your cast starts to outgrow the show, probably because it's taking so long. Jonathan Bailey is going to be in the new Jurassic City, I think it's called, which is supposed to be like the new big one, and if you think about what that did for crisp rat and like how it launched his career. This could be a launching thing. He's going to be in the new Wicked, which is supposed to be big. And I wouldn't be surprised if more of the cast starts to just take other things because there's such a time gap in between these. And it's going to, again, feel like a detriment to the show, because I think what at the core of it is supposed to feel like is a family like ensemble, and we are slowly losing the family one by one, you know, off to like they're just not on the show really mentioned anymore, and it just takes away, I think, from the heart of it, of this being like the Bridgerton family is supposed to be different, you know, like they really all love each other and hang out and want the best for each other. It's like, oh wait, they actually never see each other again? That doesn't actually match up for me. It was also her decision to gender bend Michael into Michaela, which I have no problem with gender bending it. I do think the way it was handled was not well, though, because if you have read the books, Francesca is in love with John. Like, they have a different type of romance. She's more quieter, and he gets that. And we started to see that in the show, how, like, they don't have that passionate romance. And it was frustrating to me when Violet was like, you know, like, I think John's great, I just don't think he's your guy, because, like, you don't feel fireworks and all that. Like, I think it was nice to see a different type of relationship and a different type of way. You can love someone loudly, but then you can also love someone quietly, and that's just as strong of love. So then at the end, for it to be that she meets Michaela and it's seemingly like this like love at first sight on Francesca's part, and to be like, oh, this is what my mom was talking about, I think takes away from her character, takes away from John in a big way, because she does love him, and now it seems like, oh, my mom was right, like I don't love him, I'm content with him, and takes away from her book story, because her book story is about second love, which we don't see a lot of times in these, because it's like friends to lovers, enemies to lovers, but they're all like first passionate love. So it's like to have this, to be like, I already had the great love of my life and I'm okay with not having another one. And then Michaela and this surprising on her and like creeping up and being like, oh wait, I'm actually very fond of you, I think was such a cute and unique storyline, especially in terms of like what we've seen with the other siblings. So to change that and be like, actually your mom was right, you should be feeling like that, that's what frustrates me and worries me about like what we're gonna see of her being like flustered around Michaela and stuff like that, when really it's supposed to be like she's chill with Michaela, and it's not till John dies. Actually, Michaela's supposed to be the one that's like in love with her from first sight, and it's not till John dies and Michaela's there for her and supports her that she realizes, oh, I've fallen for Michaela too. So changing that is frustrating. I also think there's just too much to focus. So this was kind of all over the place, because much like this season, there's a lot of thoughts I have, but I think overall, new showrunner, new writers maybe. I just feel like they're not, the main show writer is not as good, unfortunately, and that just worries me for what future seasons are going to be like. I think the most unrealistic, but the one that would really help, is shortening the time in between seasons releasing. I think cutting down the cast, like the extras, and really focusing on the main couple and their journey is definitely helpful. Fixing the costumes so they don't look so sheenest and make it actually look high quality and pretty and something that memorably sticks out in your mind would be great. And again, not probably going to happen, but not splitting into 2 parts and breaking the momentum of it. Overall, if I could pick like one thing to be like, this is what you need to do, it would be focus on Benedict and presumably Sophie, if that's who it's going to be. Focus on the couple, show them going through their own kind of issues, and give them the time and the growth to actually like learn from it and change, instead of just being like, oh, I'm mad at you for 2 episodes, now it's the season finale, so I guess I'll forgive you, you know? Because that's what really sucked about season 3, was that there was just no payoff. It was all like, oh, I feel this way, we're running out of episodes, I guess I'm gonna change now. Like, I feel like there wasn't enough talk for what they were dealing with. It was kind of all of a sudden they were okay, and how hard Colin went in on Penelope of being like, oh, you entrapped me into this marriage or whatever. Like, I do think it was more, there should have been more of being like, hey, that's a really awful thing you said, like, we need to discuss this and talk about it, and not just be like, oh, she's getting blackmailed, I need to help her. Like, there just needs to be more depth to it, more character growth, and then also just more time of the couple being a couple, you know? I feel like Colin and Penelope kind of had it, but it was like they were happy for 2 episodes, then they were mad again, and then they finally were happy in the last episode. So it's just, overall, it just needs to be streamlined, but also, like, streamline that stuff. Focus on your main storyline, and then figure out how to stretch that out so it's not just like drama, they love each other, drama, they love each other again, because now it's the end. So I don't have high hopes for season 4. I do love Benedict, and I feel like the quality of these, or the interest in these, is definitely going to go down once we have Eloise's season, just because that's the last of the characters that we've been with from the beginning. Like, I know we know the younger siblings, but they've either been recast or probably will be recast by the time that their seasons come out. I just don't think people have that connection to them like they do with Anthony, Daphne, Colin, Penelope, Benedict, Eloise, and stuff like that. So yeah, there's a lot to be done. I think they can do it, but unfortunately the way that they're leaning right now, it doesn't seem like they will be. So yeah, let me know what you're expecting to see in season 4 of Bridgerton and what your advice would be for what you think they need to do to improve upon the season, because season 3 was just overall a letdown. And unfortunately, when you're going to make something have that long of a wait to it then be not that great is just a real kick in the pants. So yeah, thank you guys all so much for watching. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. It was way longer than I thought, but I guess I had a lot to get out. So thank you guys again all so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye!